The thing, white people have been under attack for years. It's been systematic racism. As much as black people and people of color want to talk about systematic racism in the United States, it's quite the opposite. They get preferential treatment when it comes to getting a job, when it comes to getting into colleges. White people, on the other hand, have been getting attacked relentlessly. Look at 2016 and BLM and all the riots. We just had to sit back and watch people burn down our cities and do nothing about it. So the way to fight back against essentially this anti-white hatred that's been systemically, ingrained in U.S. society is with white unity.
Piers Morgan has essentially become the Jerry Springer of the internet.com, finding hot cultural issues that are flashpoints and then bringing on a bunch of questionable figures in order to yell and scream at each other over it, all while he pretends to be virtuous, while he pretends to be the arbiter of what's good. And honestly, I'm sick of it. And a perfect example of this kind of idea playing out in its most ridiculous way is the segment that he did comparing and contrasting the GiveSendGo fundraisers for Karmelo Anthony and Shiloh Hendrix. And of course, he decided to take a break from that and go after Lilly Gaddis for saying the N-word or admitting that she said the N-word and calling her an evil white racist throughout the course of this segment. Now, of course, this is ridiculous and we'll get to exactly why in a little bit. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
Now look, this segment is ridiculous. Even the cutaway interview to the founder of GiveSendGo is just a ridiculous virtue signal by Piers Morgan that's honestly embarrassing for him. And I actually think the GiveSendGo guy handled himself pretty well in this interview given the circumstances. But you could tell you're not going to have an intellectual discussion and you essentially set up this panel for disaster just based on the people that you feature here. Now, of course, the least offensive, the person who's playing neutral on this panel is a woman that I don't know. Apparently, she writes for the New York Post, and essentially her take on this situation is that both fundraisers are bad, she's against bad things, and she would prefer if people did good things. You also have Myron Gaines, the fresh and fit guy. This is a red pill streamer who's often talking about women bad and whatnot. He is of Sudanese descent. I bring this up because Marc Lamont Hill, who we're going to talk about in a minute, throws it in his face time and time again, and obviously this is a guy who is adept at generating headlines by saying controversial things. And maybe, just maybe, he isn't the person to have on a panel if you're actually trying to have a serious discussion. That being said, Piers is trying to have a Jerry Springer-like brawl on this panel, so Myron Gaines in that context is actually the perfect person to have right here. Then we have Marc Lamont Hill, an ultra-woke, ultra-anti-white black person. He has crazy takes throughout the entirety of this conversation. One of them I found to be even the most ridiculous, which is he actually compares the fundraiser of Karmelo Anthony to the one of Shiloh Hendrix, and he says it is the Karmelo Anthony fundraiser that is the noble, honorable, and good one, and the Shiloh one is the evil one objectively. And I just want to play a clip for you because he essentially has the ass backwards position on this particular issue.
There are a couple of things that were said that I think are really interesting and important. One, there is an outside audience of people who are watching all of this and opportunistically using it for their own agendas and projects. You know, I have an investment in believing X, so I'm going to jump in the comments of this GoFundMe, etc. I have an investment in Y, I'm going to do the same thing. But what I don't want to do is compare these two things as if they're opposite sides of the same coin. For me, the intention of the campaign matters. In the case of this woman who is using the N-word, the woman isn't disputing using the N-word. The woman isn't disputing being racist. And the comments that are being left on the site before they were suspended and the attitudes behind it weren't saying she's being railroaded, she's being misrepresented. They were simply saying, we support racism. And I think that's disgusting, no matter who's doing it. On the other hand, the people who are fundraising for Karmelo Anthony, the argument here isn't, yeah, we did something and we don't care like the other woman. The argument is we're being misrepresented here. We're being railroaded. this was a self-defense claim.
So a couple of things that need to be made 100% clear for everybody out there in the audience. As of right now, Karmelo Anthony's defense has not actually said that they're going to go with self-defense, and nothing in the facts of the case, even if we take whatever is being displayed on Facebook with fake information about the bullying that has been disproven and actually has been denied by Karmelo Anthony's PR team, makes this a self-defense case. We are not going to pretend that there is a legitimate argument on behalf of Karmelo Anthony, just like we're not going to pretend that a huge portion of the donors to his defense fund are not misinformed by bad information, fake witnesses, a fake autopsy report, and a fake Facebook statement, or that they're not malicious actors that are donating to Karmelo Anthony not because they believe he's innocent, but because they know he's guilty, but because they like the fact that he killed a white person, therefore they're donating to him as a form of black solidarity. I'm not having a conversation about whether or not stabbing somebody in the heart when you're asked to leave is worse than saying the N-word to a child that they describe as a 5-year-old autistic child, but by the way, to be clear, they have not actually identified this kid. They have not shown this kid's age or his autism status, and I'm of the belief that the kid is probably closer to around age 10, not 5, and not autistic at all. And by the way, it doesn't change my opinion of the Shiloh Hendrix GiveSendGo either.
Let's assume everybody's telling the truth. Let's assume she's telling the truth, and let's assume he's telling the truth. If he's telling the truth and he was doing self-defense and he's getting harassed and doxxed, and of course we already know lies have been told about his GoFundMe campaign saying they were spending it on mansions and cars, all the kind of racist tropes. If that's true, he's being mistreated, and I think that's a sort of very easy case to make. When it comes to her, however, let's assume she's also telling the truth, that she used the word, she thinks the kid was acting like one, she feels like she has the right to use that word against that small baby because of whatever age-appropriate thing the kid did. If she's telling the truth and she's getting doxxed and harassed, I don't know if I want to reward her behavior with $500,000. I don't think she should be doxxed. I don't think she should be harassed. I think she has been mistreated to the extent that no one should be. You have a right to be racist. You have a right to free speech in this country. But I'm not donating money for it, and I feel a lot worse about her GoFundMe than the one for the person who's been railroaded.
So yeah, even though I've made it clear that I would not donate to the Shiloh Hendrix GiveSendGo, I understand people say, oh, it's about fighting against cancel culture, it's about fighting against white guilt. I'm somebody with zero white guilt. I advocate for people to have zero white guilt, but the fact is, even if we believe her version of events to be true, she's somebody who hurled a racial epithet at a child that I probably think is around age 10, doubled down on it on her GiveSendGo, saying that she called him out for what he is, and has raised $750,000 for it. Now, of course, I don't support doxing her. I don't think people should try to ruin her life forever. I hate the idea that these viral videos can be used to deny you employment throughout the course of your life, but the fact is, I don't think Shiloh is a good person or a good representative of somebody who's being wrongfully victimized by the mob, because in reality, she at least owns up to the actions that she's being accused of. She is not a Sarah Comrie who was falsely accused of being pregnant, age 36, which was true, by the way, and walking up to 4 black kids and stealing their city bike, which was the false accusation, and having her life ruined over it. And she is not the same as Amy Cooper, who has been denied employment for years, even though the perpetrator in that particular instance is Christian Cooper, the guy who picks fights with people and threatens to steal their dog because he doesn't like that they don't walk their dog on a leash. But again, I need to emphasize, regardless of any of that, murder is significantly worse than saying a word. Whatever the word is, murder is 100% worse than that. And of course, Marc Lamont Hill is completely backwards on this issue. Then that brings us to Lilly Gaddis, who ended up stealing the show for this particular segment when she told Piers Morgan that she uses the N-word. She is not afraid to do so. And Piers Morgan decided to virtue signal repeatedly like this.
But hang on. Okay, but hang on. Sorry, just to be clear, this has got nothing to do with anything you've just said. This is a disgusting racist woman who repeatedly spews the M-word, first at a young child and then at the person taking the video of her, does it with complete impunity, does it numerous times. We are talking about a bona fide, unquestionable racist. So I don't understand why what you've just said to me bears any relation to white unity or anything that you've just said. She's just a racist. End, isn't she? You wouldn't dispute that.
It's not about her. It's not about her. It's about
it is about her.
Coming together and supporting another white person. And it doesn't matter.
Why would you want to support a white racist?
Because I want to support free speech, and you cannot have free speech in a country.
That's fine. You can support free speech, but you also have to be accountable for what you say. Would you use the N-word out of interest?
Yes.
You would?
Mm-hmm. I do, quite frequently.
You use the N-word quite frequently. Well, why? Other than the fact you're a despicable racist. Are you?
Some would say I am. I guess according to the ADL, I'm a white supremacist. I'm a neo-Nazi.
If you use the N-word repeatedly, you are a racist, then, are you?
Sure, I'll embrace that. If that means forwarding, helping white people achieve freedom of speech, real freedom of speech, which, by the way, Shiloh Hendrix is being attacked on all fronts. They're trying to bring legal charges against her. They're trying to get her children taken away. So you were saying Karmelo Anthony, it doesn't matter. That's a different
Sorry, but just to be
thing.
clear, you just said to me you use the N-word regularly. In what context? Do you use it with black people?
Yes, if it's appropriate.
Now look, you guys may or may not remember this, but on this channel, I talked about how Lilly Gaddis is somebody who just pandered her way into E-fame on the right-wing side, and I find that to be ridiculous for a number of reasons, but the fact is, among the things that she was doing in order to get herself attention was the fact that she said the N-word, although it was not in a derogatory context, and it was with the A, not with the hard R, in one of her videos. And by the way, that is what got her the most amount of attention when she burst onto the scene.
When would it be appropriate to use the N-word? When would it be appropriate?
Anytime I feel like it.
So you're an unashamed racist?
Correct.
Well, do you understand that makes you a despicable human being?
I guess so. I don't really care. I mean, why are we not talking about Shiloh Hendrix? Why are we talking about?
Well, actually, I think you've moved it on in this debate very quickly to your own racism, which explains why you've supported her in public and why you've got all these views. You see no problem with a woman shrieking the N-word repeatedly because you yourself are a despicable racist.
Now, Piers Morgan probably, but his producers definitely 100% know this. This is, in fact, why they brought Lilly onto the panel. Now, I know she had a tweet related to this and how she wants to support Shiloh and whatnot, but the fact is, this girl is quite literally known for saying, even though it wasn't in a derogatory sense, even though it wasn't with a hard R, even though it wasn't in reference to black people, the N-word. That's what she's famous for. So think about how ridiculous this whole interaction is. Piers Morgan says, "Would you say this word?" She says, yes. In fact, this is what she is known for. This is what she's famous for. And then Piers Morgan virtue signals against her, says that this person is a virulent racist, and goes on this whole rant about how he's this holier than thou figure, when the fact is they brought her on this show in order to get her to stir up controversy, not to have a logical or reasoned discussion based on these issues. I mean, there's a reason why Piers Morgan has people like this, everybody on this panel, except for the boring New York Post person, and doesn't have people like me on this show. It's because he knows these people are here to generate viral clips. These people are here to say controversial stuff. And by the way, it's kind of embarrassing that Piers Morgan calls this show uncensored, allows people to swear, but he bleeps out the N-word when it's used even by black people, which, by the way, on this panel, it was used exclusively by black people, because obviously this is just a big money grab. But yeah, so my opinion on this whole Lilly Gaddis thing is, honestly, it's the biggest embarrassment for Piers Morgan humanly possible.
You yourself are a despicable racist, and you've just proudly admitted that with a smug grin on your face, which is pretty horrifying, actually, for most people to have to watch. And shame on you. You're entitled to do it, and I'm entitled to call you despicable.
Well, shame on white people for allowing themselves to be systematically discriminated against in the United States. This is our country. This is a country that should be.
What do you mean your country?
Because I'm white and my
Well, there are no black people in American history. Is that what you're saying? That they've all just landed in America, invading you,
yes.
your white country? Is that your position?
Because the whole entire reason that she is known is for saying the N-word. The only reason that Piers Morgan booked her is because she's called for like white unity or white solidarity and retweeted something from Nick Fuentes about how white people need to get tribal. So this was all a setup so he could virtue signal against her. So he could say, that's a bad white girl. That girl with the blue eyes, her saying white unity is evil, white, and racist. And I, Piers Morgan, am above that. And by the way, that virtue signaling attitude went into the interview with one of the founders of GiveSendGo, and it was absolutely embarrassing for a number of reasons, and chief among them is that Piers Morgan doesn't understand the First Amendment.
Just to be clear, then, hang on, just to be clear, so that's interesting what you just said. So you would let anybody onto your platform to raise money for anything? Is that your position?
No, the position is that there are laws that define what is legal and what isn't legal. And we adhere to the laws as the framework for what is and isn't allowed.
But inciting racial hatred is a crime, right?
Inciting racial hatred is a crime?
Yeah.
Where?
You don't think it's a crime?
In the U.S.?
Yeah, it is.
So to give you context for this portion of the conversation, the GiveSendGo guy said that the reason why he's actually keeping the fundraisers up is because he follows the law and he respects the First Amendment and whatnot, so he doesn't want to restrict people, even that he disagrees with, from raising money on his platform. And by the way, GiveSendGo has held to their principles with the Kyle Rittenhouse fundraiser, with the Daniel Penny fundraiser, and even extended those principles to the Karmelo Anthony fundraiser. GoFundMe doesn't allow you to raise money for criminal defense. GiveSendGo is the place that you go in order to do so, and of course I respect them for that, even though I understand why people are donating to Karmelo Anthony and how, based on the information we have right now, he has no legitimate self-defense case. So I commend him for that. But then Piers Morgan goes on that whole rant about how racial hatred, inciting racial hatred, is somehow a crime in the United States of America. The CEO says no, it's not, and Piers says no, I've checked into it, and it definitely is. Trust me, because I'm the pigeon lady from Home Alone.
Inciting racial hatred is a crime?
Yeah.
Where?
You don't think it's a crime?
In the U.S.?
Yeah, it is.
I've never seen that as a law on the books, but
it is.
That was part of the reason.
I'm not even American, and I know it's a law on the books. You're not allowed to incite racial hatred or violence against ethnic groups based on their ethnicity. What could be a more glaring example than someone on camera calling black people the N-word?
Piers, you didn't check into it. You didn't have any of your production staff check into it. Maybe you're thinking of the UK, where they ban and restrict all manner of speech, but in the United States of America, in no way, shape, or form is it illegal for a white person to say the N-word. Is it illegal for you to incite hatred? And by the way, Piers Morgan knows he's on a weak footing right here, because he ends up saying racial hatred and violence. He adds in the violent thing, and I will just point out that in no way, shape, or form was Shiloh Hendrix uttering this no-no word at this 10-year-old boy described as a 5-year-old autistic boy, her inciting racial violence. Again, these kind of people right here, like Piers Morgan, make you want to jump on board the Shiloh train, so I can understand how some people get caught up in that hysteria, because he's so bad, he's so embarrassing, and by the way, he's trying to make the GoFundMe platform alternative GiveSendGo significantly worse by trying to get them to ban it. Then he ultimately ends up calling them out for having no abortion fundraisers on their platform, and honestly, the GiveSendGo guy does not have a good explanation for why that's the case.
Do you allow people to do pro-abortion? Do you allow pro-abortion fundraising?
Actually, there's two caveats to what GiveSendGo has carved out, and one of them is it's broken into two pieces, but it's the protection of children. So we say we're going to protect children because they don't have a voice. So we're not going to allow fundraising for abortions on GiveSendGo, and we're not going to allow fundraising for the transition of children.
Okay, but what about a 5-year-old child being? What about a 5-year-old black child being called the N-word?
What about that?
where does the protection for that child come in?
So look, the GiveSendGo guy ended up talking about legality in terms of his defense of the speech and whatnot, and then he gets tripped up right here based on the fact that it's a Christian platform, and therefore it's reflective of Christian values, and the Christian values reflected right here are the anti-abortion stance and the anti-transing the kid stance. Now, to be clear, you can raise money for both of those things on GoFundMe if you were to want to, but the difference that Piers Morgan, and honestly this guy fails to mention throughout the whole course of this conversation, is that they're not actually raising money on the GiveSendGo for Karmelo Anthony, at least according to the text of the GiveSendGo. For the murder. The murder already occurred. They're raising money for the criminal defense. Again, which is legal. It's something that you are entitled to in the United States of America. So that's what they're raising money for in that particular case. Also, in addition to that, they're not raising money for Shiloh Hendrix to say the N-word to a black kid age 5 to age 10. They're raising money to relocate her due to the fact that there was a wildly disproportionate reaction to that, where they were doxing her, trying to threaten her and whatnot, and they're trying to help her have safety. Now, in contrast to that, raising money for people to go through a transit procedure or raising money for people to do an abortion is raising money for the action, and in those particular cases, he deems those actions to be harmful to a child.
Well, that's their parents' responsibility. That's like if my child, and I have several children, if my child was called something bad, I would take my child aside and I would tell them.
But you just said that one of the caveats.
Hang on,
you just said one of the caveats for GiveSendGo is the protection of children. You talked about the transitioning process. You talked about abortion, which is obviously your Christian perspective on that. And I'm simply saying, why doesn't it include children being racially abused?
So despite Piers Morgan's grandstanding on this particular issue, he is in fact the one that is being inconsistent, and he is in fact the one that's pushing for censorship. Now, I also want to point out that Amy Cooper ends up being mentioned throughout the course of this conversation, and then Piers Morgan defames Amy Cooper by saying that she racially abused a minority, which just goes to show you what a failed grasp of reality Piers Morgan actually has on these particular issues.
3 years ago in New York City, in the middle of the city, there was an altercation between a woman and a black man over bird watching and dogs, and her name was Amy Cooper. And to this day, 3 years later, she hasn't been able to find a job. Because she made a bad mistake, saying the wrong thing in a particular moment
she
where
racially abused him. She racially abused him. If you racially abuse people, you are made accountable for your actions.
So for the rest of your life, the rest of your life, you're shut off from society.
If you call black people the N-word and racially abuse them, unfortunately, yes, it has consequences, probably for your professional life, for the rest of your professional life.
No, Amy Cooper did not racially abuse Christian Cooper. And by the way, they're not related even though they have the same last name. What happened is she was walking her dog in an area of Central Park called the Ramba. Christian Cooper, who describes himself as a bird watcher, didn't like that, so he told her to leash her dog. She said no, and then he pulled out dog treats and implied that he was going to steal her dog as a punishment for her. So again, she, being a woman alone in the park, being confronted by a man, called the police based on this. And by the way, this is not according to me, this is not according to Amy Cooper, this is according to Christian Cooper's original Facebook post. But because it was in 2020, because people liked the Karen meme, this race hoax ended up ruining this woman's life. Because we have a culture that's so backwards on race that a white person, a white woman, getting into an argument with a black person is considered evil, white, and racist. And I will just point out, if you switch the races, if you have made them both the same race, you are going to get this result each and every time when you have a man confront somebody alone in the park and threaten to steal their dog as punishment for the woman refusing to obey the man. This will happen 100% of the time. It was completely justified. And by the way, we ended up finding out later on that Christian Cooper had gotten into fights and other altercations with other people walking dogs. That's why he, not being a dog owner, carried the dog treats on him. So this was a guy looking for a conflict. He got the conflict, and rather than being punished and held accountable for his actions, her life ended up getting ruined, and this guy ended up getting a National Geographic show. So yeah, Piers Morgan, absolutely embarrassing due to his lack of knowledge on this particular case, and a double embarrassing moment where he says, yeah, she should be denied employment for the rest of her life for racially abusing a man. Again, calling the cops on somebody who's threatening to take her dog because she refused to obey him alone in the park when he confronted her. Absolutely shameful and disgusting. And of course, this segment ends up capping off with another ridiculous moment where Piers Morgan decides to dare Lilly into saying the N-word. And by the way, I think she was about to do it, which is kind of hilarious. But then Marc Lamont Hill absolutely loses his mind.
Say
You
the
will
M-
not have
Go on,
free
say,
speech.
go on. Say the M word. Go on.
No.
hang on.
Invite. No.
No.
I don't want you to invite this woman to say a racially harmful term in front of me because I'm the only on here. So if she says it, I'm the victim of it. So please don't invite her for ratings to call me the N-word because that's basically what it's going to be. There's a bunch of white people up here. You and one Uncle Tom on the left here, and asking her to say the N-word while I'm here is ridiculous. You would not sit here with a Jewish person and say, please use a Jewish slur in front of this Jewish. It's ridiculous. I understand you don't have any bad intent, Piers. I understand what you're trying to do. But we already know she's racist, and I don't want to invite a racial harm to me.
I hear you.
I genuinely, legitimately hate the left and how embarrassing they are, and Marc Lamont Hill having a meltdown over the prospect of a white woman not even saying the N-word to her, but saying the N-word on this show after she was provoked and dared to say it by Piers Morgan. Again, the idea of that, having this meltdown, is ridiculous from top to bottom. It's embarrassing, and it just goes to show you how performative all of this is. Marc Lamont Hill said the N-word throughout the course of this segment. Myron Gaines, who is actually of African descent, and Marc Lamont Hill doesn't like that, by the way. He doesn't think that he is black in the American sense, which you could make the case for that, has said this throughout the course of this particular segment, but the prospect, the idea that he might hear it from this white girl, sent him into this rage. He had this meltdown over it, which is just embarrassing for all of us to see. I mean, honestly, seriously, all you had to do was be sane, sober-minded, and say, I don't like the idea that this woman hurled that epithet at a child. Marc Lamont Hill had to take it a step further and infantilize the child, who's probably age 10, said that he was a baby, and then he caps off the whole segment with this ridiculous meltdown, which, by the way, Piers Morgan responds to by apologizing to him, proving that Piers Morgan is consumed with white guilt and the need to virtue signal. So yeah, this panel, embarrassing in every possible way, but it was designed to be this way. The most cringe element of it, other than Marc Lamont Hill having that meltdown, is Piers Morgan bringing on somebody who's famous for being a white girl who said the N-word, again, not against a black person, not with the hard R, but that's why she's famous, and then getting angry and virtue signaling against her based on her saying, yeah, I said the word. Again, ridiculous in every possible way, and there's a reason why all of these people would be brought on the show again, and I never get invited. But, you know, I'll leave that up to your imagination. Now, of course, I want to leave this up to you guys out there in the audience. If you like this video, show me by leaving a like, tell me what you think in the comments, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. But this has been me talking about this absurd panel on Piers Morgan Uncensored. Till next time.